Welcome to the Ideas on Stage podcast, your regular insight into leadership communication.
Welcome. Today we have Isaac Getz. And Isaac, you're many things. You're an author, you're a speaker, you're a thinker, you're a changer of corporations. And I'm wondering, what are you working on these days?
I'd say that I worked on a 5-year research on something that me and my co-author Laurent Marbacher called the Altruistic Operations, and the book came out several months ago, and what I'm doing now basically is trying to make this business philosophy known to as many business audiences as possible through different writings, in media, through speaking, and basically diffusing this message to as many people in the corporate world as possible.
Okay, so what is an altruistic corporation? We have the concept of altruism.
Right.
And how does that work for the difference between an individual and a corporation?
Yeah, it's different. It's an oxymoron. Corporations are not supposed to be altruistic, right? They're supposed to care about themselves. So what we found that there are companies that put themselves in the service of the what we call others. It means the customers, the suppliers, the local communities, and they do it through their core business processes, and they do it unconditionally. And what's amazing is that we found that it's also the secret of their business success, because the consequence of putting themselves in the unconditional service of their counterparts was a lasting economic success.
Okay, so are we speaking about a structural change? Is this in the bylaws of a corporation? I mean, how do we go about setting up an altruistic corporation?
It's an interesting thing, because when we talk about these issues, many people say, is it a B Corp? Is it a benefit corporation? Is it what in France is called L'Entreprise Altruiste? And in fact, it is related, but it is not.
Okay.
Things like benefit corporation or in France, Entreprise à mission, they are basically legal definitions.
Right.
It's nice. We can discuss about it, but the work still has to be done. It's not because you change the bylaws, the corporate bylaws, is that the way your company is run changed. B Corp is a little bit, I would say, more advanced in that sense, because B Corp is a certification. So it means that you are certified by already running a company in a certain way. That said, there are issues with certifications too. Everyone knows that you can be ISO 9001 certified and still be a company that is not caring about too much about customers, for example. We basically studied the transformations, because it's not about a certain model or specific way of running the business, but how you transform a traditional corporation which is turned inwards, its own profits or its own shareholders, towards the others unconditionally and through their business processes. And this is a major transformation.
I could imagine there's a great deal of resistance. You know, when you go into a typical boardroom, you're working with CEOs. Where is the locus of change? Where is the shift happening? Is it from the employees? Is it coming from the outside consumers? Or is it starting at the top? Or none of
Well, there are several questions in your question. So if we talk about the resistance from the executive boards, there is none. Why? Because the only persons to whom the CEO could potentially resist is his board of directors, because those are the people who are above him. The board of directors are still not in their majority pressing companies to transform in that sense, although everyone probably heard about Larry Fink and BlackRock. And indeed, if they start to pressure CEOs, there will be resistance, because it's inevitable. The moment you start to press the rubber resists, and more you press and more it resists. And we talk about it in our book of how to create a dialogue between stockholders and boards and the CEO. However, and there is no resistance basically because the transformations are launched by the CEOs. Okay. So they don't resist themselves, right? They understand something in the changing world. They probably want to connect. We found out something that they live inside, their values, their beliefs with what's going on in corporations, and then they want to change, transform these corporations in accordance. There is obviously certain, I would say, I don't know how call it, dragging the feet, if you want, from the people who are used to the ordinary way to do business, right? Sure. Because you're talking to transform business processes, right? And so people are used to business processes. They are. So basically the client. What do you mean to serve the client unconditionally? The client, you are with the client to have a return on him. Yeah. Right? And so you are saying, no, you unconditional. It means that, you serve your client and do your maximum, your best to the client, even if you don't make money and even if you lose money. And that's very hard to understand. If you say to a salesman, you go a little bit farther and you were not here to sell. Right. But we're here to take care of the people, and we're not going to sell the stuff that he doesn't need, even if he can make money on it. Again, if you have a business process where a salesman makes money on the commission, right? Commissions, right? So there's a lot of changes, but the key, obviously, to successful transformation, and I'll stop here because we can talk for hours about that, is that people don't resist the change or transformation, but they resist being transformed, right? And not me who told it, it's Peter Zenge, but the principle is how you involve your employees to be the actors and not the subjects of this transformation.
Right. So you're putting people first. And is it fair to say that as a consequence of this sort of action, you have your profit? It's like the notion of happiness. Happiness is a consequence.
Exactly. The only thing is that it's not me who put people first, right? That would be a theory. It's the company that has to do that. Okay. And most of the companies are not doing that, right? Human beings in most of the companies are human resources, are not human beings. So, what do you do with human resources, right? You use them, you exploit them, and they're the numbers, and so you manage them. Now, in some companies, even they say, no, we invest in people, right? There is this 181 CEOs, members of, the world largest or American largest CEOs from Amazon to Walmart, who said we need to invest in people. So that makes people not really human resources, but makes human capital. So again, you seek a return on people, right? So the people are not first, right? They are always kind of subordinated to some financial considerations or some financial indicators. If you really in the company want to put the company in the unconditional service of the people, you need to take care of their fundamental psychological needs. And that's what you do. And you are absolutely right. If you do that unconditionally and do it the right way, the people will, instead of coming to work because they must, they will come to work because they want to. And once at work, they will be willing to do their best to realize company's vision. And that's where, as a consequence, exactly as you said, you will see the financial performance, the economic results.
So it seems to me we need to change our systems of measurement. Because if we're going in with certain set of expectations, this process may take a longer horizon than traditional.
Measurement is important. There are a lot of talk about measurement. You know, there's a saying in English, you think what can be measured can be done, or something like that, right? This is the way. Sometimes people have the impression that in these companies, you know, like a hippie colony, you know, you go back to 60s or 70s, you know, and everyone like smokes and inhales and all kind of things. You know, there are very, very well organized companies, but they are not organized by some others,
Right.
but self-organized.
Okay.
And that means that not measured by others, but are self-measured. The teams measure themselves. And so they do have indicators. And they know how well they're doing. And they know what do they need to improve. But it's them who decided. They're not controlled by some people who are more intelligent than them and then will tell them what they must do.
Okay, so it's more of a human level approach. It seems to me that you're taking out the centralization. So if you're, it almost sounds like a classic DAO. It's like a decentralized, autonomous organization where the individual is measuring themselves.
Yeah, you're right. This thinking about decentralization, it goes back to the first business book ever written, right? The Concept of Corporation by Peter Drucker, and who studied the key during the Second World War, right? Being as a sociologist, right? He studied General Motors, trying to understand what was the key of their success, and he basically, one of the main points was that General Motors was decentralized, right? In different brands and different parts of the company, and each one would run, you know, Chevrolet and Buick and would run in their own way. And then he said that if that works so well, so that you put decisions closer, right, to the ground, we need then to push it down to the level of the operators. And the result of that was that he was kicked out of General Motors and no one wanted to see him ever there, including the trade unions. No one liked that idea. But in fact, this is a pure common sense, right? That the decision has to be pushed down to the level where the people are competent enough to make it. While in the traditional corporation, all decisions goes up and up and up and then end up ultimately quite often at the executive meetings, right? And while they're taking these decisions, the client is not waiting. He's gone already, right?
Right. You do a lot of work with corporations. I'm wondering if you're sensing any sort of generational shifts.
I have to precise, I'm not a consultant. I study corporations and I do a lot of pro bono conversations with executives and CEOs on these issues, right? So they rather see me as sort of business philosopher, right? And they talk to me about the challenges and the issues that they encounter. The generational issue is an important one, and it relates to rising expectations, right, in the current world. And these expectations come from employees, and among the employees you have these millennials that beginning this year represent roughly half of all employees, and in 10 years it will be 75%.
Wow.
And these people have expectations towards corporations which are rather different of the older generations. And one of the main that I'm interested in, and that is very relevant to my work, to our work, is that they expect corporations not to think only about their own financial returns, but also think about the society in general. And the number of those who think like that or have this expectation is 87%. So it's a very, very big part of millennials who represent half of the employees. And the companies obviously want to hire them and, most importantly, to retain them.
Yeah. You know, it strikes me too that if we're in this model, we hear a lot of I mean, personal development, personal growth is always a topic. It seems to me that this would be a very good environment for the cultivation of development. Are you seeing that in the employees?
The key aspect of this previous research that I did on the liberated companies, right, and that was really about people, right? And the altruistic corporations is more about the customers, suppliers, and local communities, right? Okay. And the people aspect, and I researched it in my previous research program of 5 years in several dozen corporations, is that if you want people to be engaged, if you want them to come to work because they want, right, not because they must, you need to satisfy their fundamental psychological needs. One of them is growth, right, is self-realization. The other two is, I call it intrinsic equality, being treated as intrinsically equal to others, and self-direction. So it's absolutely true. If you want to have engaged people, you have to take care of that, because it's like the model, the psychological model is multiplication, right? It's one of them is zero, the people are not engaged. It's zero engagement. So to give you just one example, in this company, if you want someone to grow, right, to self-develop, you probably want to know where his potential is, right? So he can realize his potential. So the question is usually asked, these people, some companies, even when they're hired immediately, right, who basically, where do you want to work? You're an engineer, right? We have so many go around, you know, and find you're like in Gore, they say the sweet spot. In some other companies, they would be asking, okay, you're doing this job, what would be a field that you would like to learn stuff in, right? Maybe you're an engineer, but maybe you're interested in social networks. Right. Maybe you're interested in data mining or whatever. And obviously, if you say I want to learn how to play Hawaiian guitar, right, it's maybe a little bit awkward, but you won't tell that, you won't ask for that because you're a responsible person, right? But you will ask for some things that have relevance generally to the business economy, and that you think that you have some potential, right, in doing that. And you didn't have simply chance to learn that because, you know, you have chosen at the age of 18 or 20 some field and you specialized in that. And now, so that's how you grow, right? Because you ask people. The third question may be very simple is, you know, if you would start again, okay, you worked here 5 years, what would you like to do in our company, right? It doesn't mean that, okay, tomorrow you quit this team, go somewhere else, you know, and basically you can get lost. No, obviously you won't do that because intrinsic equality, you have respect to your colleagues, but gradually you phase out from your commitments there and you start to take commitments in the areas where you want to grow. So this is just maybe 3 things, right, that you're doing in these companies. There are dozens of things that can do, and that most of the companies are not doing because people are stuck in their rectangles, you know, in the org chart, they're in their box. And you know, you're an accountant, and so you look at the spreadsheet till your retirement, basically.
You know, at the beginning of this, you talked about going out and proselytizing or being an advocate for change. What sort of difficulties do you face in terms of communication and getting this message out?
Okay, people sometimes call me, you have to evangelize, and sometimes in France I'm called the Pope of liberated companies, and they say that being called Isaac, I can't be Pope and can't evangelize. But I'm trying to in fact diffuse, to make known as much as possible this philosophy that I truly believe in, and most importantly, all the CEOs, all the companies, the employees there, the leaders there, they truly believe that it works and they live it, and that's, I have so many testimonials. People say it's literally changed my life, and not only my life, my family's life. Because these principles are the simple principle of a natural human interaction. While most of the companies, the way they're organized, they're not natural to human beings. Human beings are not organized spontaneously at home by the hierarchies and have our kitchen policy, right? You don't have a kitchen policy. You just have a certain education, and you say to your kid, if you finished your dinner and you want to go and play, you just take your plate and you put in the dishwasher, right? And there is no kitchen policy, and there is no the head of the kitchen and no whatever, right?
Right.
Maybe some husbands will disagree with that, but anyway, but generally, right? But in some way, when you have 10 people in company, they start to say, I'm the boss, we'll have this organization, and they start to sweat over the org chart.
Yeah. Is there a good number? Is there a good number to begin?
It's good number to stop.
To stop.
Yeah,
It's a good,
I mean, for many companies, I'm telling you both from research and from the experience, because research is clear. There's a sociological and anthropological research on that the boundary is about 150 people. Let's say maybe 200 people, and in companies too. And the reason is very simple, is that at that point you can't remember anymore the first names of people that are, and once you don't have the first name, then you become formal, then you start to write emails with 2 people, on the CC, and you say, Mr. That, I have, and so at that point in the companies that really care about having the human interaction and between authentic relationship between people who work, they will break up the organization. Let's say, to make it simple, it's sometimes called amoeba, right? There's a little animal. So they kind of divide, and it appears like to financial people, it appears like the high crime, right? It's like you can be impeached for that, basically. It's like how you have 2 accountants, you have 2 purchasing persons. It's like you double, all these functions. It's like a total waste. But in fact, they don't see that you, by keeping these organizations human, right? To a certain limit, everything is so smooth that you have a little problem, you go in to see Joe or James or whatever, and said, the client called me, we promised to deliver him by Monday, but now he needs it by Friday. Can we do something? And you say, okay, let me talk to my team. I come back in half an hour, I'll give you the answers. Okay, I come back, okay, we can try to do that, maybe half on Monday and maybe the other half on Tuesday morning. Can you call the client? Boom, boom, boom. In 10 minutes, it's done.
So you get
most companies, it can't be done.
So you're getting the organization to change into an organism. So you have a living.
It's true. It's organic. It's not mechanic or mechanistic. And as you are to the point that most organizations grew since the Industrial Revolution, right? Believing that the marvel of the world is a mechanism, right? And so engineers, basically, Taylor was engineer, right? They started to do these mechanisms with different parts that interact in a very rigid, mechanical way, right? But it's not natural to human beings. What is natural to human beings is to evolve in organic, right? Like in the nature, right? In the world,
absolutely.
right? And so these interactions are organic, and they're changing and they're evolving, depending, it's also very important, on the world that evolves around us, because the mechanistic organization, it can be a Swiss watch, and they don't have anything against Swiss watch. I have one, not very expensive, but it's working very well. But the problem is that if you try to build it, it's totally isolated thing. I mean, it can be waterproof, airtight, so whatever happens in the nature, we don't care. But organizations are not isolated from the outside world. On the opposite. They are built to serve the outside world. They are built to interact with the clients. They are built to interact with suppliers. They are built to interact with local communities. And the problem is that this world is moving, and organizations are turned towards themselves and towards the machinery inside, right? How many layers we'll have, what kind of new procedure we'll put, how do we go through the silos to matrix, to I don't know, whatever, and they spend years in that. And the clients, they're knocking the door and say, hi, guys, when are you going to finish your meeting, because you shut your telephones off.
Well, exactly. I mean, it dawns on me that you're talking about something that's very complicated in the Swiss watch sense, whereas the world is more complex, and so you have the interactions of complexity So it's a system.
I hope that you realize how nuanced you are, and it's a little bit sophisticated, right? What you're saying, right? I mean, I'm with you, right? For most people, it's almost synonymous, like complicated and complex,
Well,
right?
maybe you want to say a little something, or we can both.
But you're to
Yeah.
the point, right?
Right.
And obviously, most of the companies do it complicated, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The complex, it's also simple. It's not oversimplified.
Right.
But it's simple. But it doesn't mean that it's easy.
Exactly.
Okay. So yes, this is very complex. The transformation is very complex. It's not complicated, right? It's very complex.
Right.
There are a lot of issues. One to begin with that's rather a complex issue is the ego of the CEO, for example.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so if you need to make a transformation, we talked about people before, right? So if you want to transform an organization where you put organization in the service of employees, right, and you treat them as intrinsically equal, it means you trust their intelligence, to make it simpler.
Yeah.
And no, you have an extremely inflated ego because you think you're so smart and so intelligent that you know everything. It won't work.
Right.
So it's not easy, right? It's complex, and there are a lot of dimensions, and unfortunately, I just want, because since we're talking about unfortunately, it makes me laugh. Yesterday I also gave an interview. I said, this company liberated themselves, so what did they do? I know the guys can tell their vacations, and they don't have any time clock. And then now they have, I think, only 2 hierarchical levels. So they believe that that's it. You know, so they really don't understand the complexity of the issue. Right. And the CEO talks all around the place. It's all the interviews and all the cameras. So probably his ego is still big enough to fill the whole screen of the camera, right? And he's often there. So there's something that is not working there, obviously. And then some companies, they believe that you just can, twist little things here and there on the surface, and the organization is transformed. And that employees believe that. They don't. Employees are like children. They feel that the false note, right? Like in music,
well, it's not authentic.
1 kilometer, right? And they see that.
Yeah. So your approach now with altruism, you're taking it through all the systems. You're taking the people, the organization, the supply chain, and so it's going to impact the entire society eventually.
I want to be precise. Okay. We're not talking about altruism. Altruism is something that a human being does. Okay? We had this concept of altruistic corporations that we defined very clearly is transforming your business processes to serve unconditionally, your customers, suppliers, and local communities. Okay. And that's why we call this oxymoron altruistic corporations, from the word altruism, from Latin word alter, it means the others.
The others, right.
So they put themselves in the service of the others instead of their financial interests or shareholder interests, right? These interests are served, but as a consequence, not as a goal.
Okay, so you're building an ecosystem. It's a functional ecosystem if a corporation goes all the way through.
I don't. Maybe you'll say I'm very pedantic, right? But it's not me. I'm not building anything. If they transform themselves, and the ecosystem. That's a very, very important point, an interesting point. The ecosystem exists, but it's basically ignored.
Okay.
If you think that your customer is basically the other side of the economic transaction, and all you seek from him is a return, all you care about is a return on your customer, right?
You wouldn't see them as a transaction.
It's an economic transaction, right? I mean, I give you that, you give me this, okay? But he knows that you don't care about him. Okay. He knows that what you want is a return on him. So potentially it's an ecosystem, but basically you build a wall between you. Okay. The same is with supplier. The supplier quickly knows that you are not here to treat him well. You just want to extract the maximum of value from him at the minimal price. And you operate in some communities, you build their plant or whatever, a hypermarket, you obviously want to get from them the best economic advantages, tax, maybe subsidies and so on. So basically use them instead of support them, right?
Right. Yeah. So what you're describing is a complete ecosystem in an altruistic system.
Right. So the ecosystem exists, but it's ignored by most of the companies because what they're doing, they're basically building the walls around themselves. And the first wall that they build is with their customers, considering the customer is the other end of the economic transaction, and all they're looking at is to get a return on the customer. And the customer understands that.
Right.
The suppliers is the same. All you try to get is to extract value from them at the lowest cost. And the communities, you're looking to use them through kind of good conditions, subsidies, taxes, and stuff like that when you build their hypermarket or plant, and you are not there to support them. And so this ecosystem potentially exists, but it's basically cut off by a traditional corporation. While the altruistic corporation, again, alter the other, they decided to put themselves in the service of this economic counterparts. Obviously, it's not by making declarations. This is not a political stance or political issue. It's by transforming your business process. And when you transform your business processes, it means that all the people who are running these business processes, they are building this type of relationship with these counterparts.
Okay, so that's really the key. You're moving from transaction to relation.
Exactly. So you pointed to one of the key ingredients of the altruistic corporation that doesn't see the way it interacts with these counterparts as being economic transactions, but trying to build the authentic relationships. And as we sometimes say, it's a little bit like with a friend, right? If you invite a friend for a weekend to stay in your house, you don't say, you're a friend, as long as I get a return on you. You don't say that, right? And so basically they treat, of course, remember that the first step, they treat the employees as they were friends, okay? Right. But then these employees try to build this type of relationship with all the other counterparts as they were friends. And that's why they don't hesitate to put an extra effort or extra time for the person. For the person, it's interesting that I said it's Freudian slip, right? For the customer, but they see in him or her a person first, and not as an economic counterpart, right?
Right. Well, Isaac, you've been really generous with your time. You're describing a world. You're describing a world that we should all move into and live into, because this isn't something that could be put on a piece of paper and roadmap.
I put it on a piece of paper. It's 528 pages of paper.
So it's one big piece of paper.
It's it's a lot of paper.
I think we all need to sit down and read that.
A lot of paper. I hope it's recycled because it's a lot of paper. It's like that. Yeah.
Okay, and before we go, is there anything that you would like to close with?
Well, I enjoyed very much our conversation, and basically, we personally, me and my co-author, Laurent Marbacher, we believe that this basically philosophy of the altruistic corporation shows the way to reinvent the capitalistic firm, and some people say to reinvent the capitalism.
And just in time. Thank you, Isaac.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Ideas on Stage podcast, there are many more you might like, so please subscribe, leave us a review, and tell us what you think. You can find many more ideas on business communication at ideasonstage.com or by searching for Ideas on Stage on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and goodbye for now.